Today's episode of Poets at War is sponsored by the following.
Hello, I'm Sarah Levesque, Editor-in-Chief of Logo Sophia magazine. I would like to invite you to explore our Pilgrim's Journal of Life, Love, and Literature, both in visual format and in podcast format. Our goal is to help bridge the gaps between different Christian denominations and traditions. Please visit our website at logosophiamag.com to read or listen to stories, articles, poetry, and more, all for free. We look forward to journeying with you.
Today on the show, we return with Brendan Sunshine to check in on news and the state of storytelling and where we're thinking it's going in the future. Welcome to the trenches. You are listening to Poets at War.
As I'm talking to some of these painter people, I'm like, you really don't want my input because my aesthetic is Dragon-y Cracker Barrel.
Dragon-y Cracker Barrel, yeah. That sums it up pretty well, actually. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's totally what you are.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So, but yeah. So how's work and life and everything else?
Well, I mean, work is the incessant garbage that it always is. News is so frustrating.
News is frustrating. You know, I'm editing news right now too.
You're yeah. Oh, you are?
1819 out of Birmingham, Alabama through Yonder Child.
Okay.
But yeah, they're kind of a new media mixed with traditional media thing. I'm not doing as much as you would be doing because you're more traditional, but still, it's like they need something turned around immediately, you know?
Right. You have fast turnaround is one thing, but the other thing that you're dealing with is like, especially with traditional media, it's like, we're going to devote 20 seconds to this story that we really need a minute to fully explain. Like one of the things that bugs me recently that they talked about, if I move forward, the camera realizes that I need to be lit. There you go. Halfway, you know. But one of the things that like we were doing is we were talking about how according to the New England Medical Journal, gun violence is now the #1 cause of death of minors. But then the anchor sent out a thing recently, not recently, like this same day, because there were a bunch of drownings that happened relatively recently around Lake Michigan, which is close to where we live and within our viewing area. And so they were like, well, we need to, talking about, because we've been doing some stories on this, and he's like, apparently drownings are now like the #1 cause of death of kids ages 1 to 4. I'm sitting here going, but we just said that the leading cause of death of minors is stop. The #1 cause of death of of minors is gun violence. So which is it?
Right. And of course, you and I are sitting back here going, yeah, actually, it's abortion, but
yeah. Well, there's that, but also it's like, wow, it's almost as if how you quantify things adjusts the statistics.
No kidding.
Do you know? So it's like, it's like, okay, so there are so many ways that I can think of that they could have gun violence being the #1 cause of death among minors. There's so many ways to cheese that, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're keeping the same sample size and keeping the same like methodology of how you measure, well, you could subdivide things within the medical category. Like heart attacks are different from cold lung stuff, which is different from blunt force trauma, which is different from thing. But then you can clump together suicides, accidental shootings, deliberate shootings.
Right. Yeah.
You can clump all those together, but you separate all these out. So, look,
Yeah. And this kind of transitions well into the topic that we agreed to talk about today. Basically, like the idea of where is storytelling, and we can start here in the sort of nonfiction world because it's still storytelling.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, do people even realize anymore that the news, by its very nature, journalism, is essentially like taking facts and converting it into a narrative, as opposed to the idea that a lot of conservatives especially push still is like, just tell the facts. Well, if you just tell the facts, like, where do you stop? You actually have to have a narrative in order to say like where you stop speaking the facts. Like you were saying, you've got all these subdivided categories. Do we need every single subcategory told to the people or not, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because when I'm looking at this, I'm in the middle, right? I'm in the middle of things. I can see the bias around me, and also part of it is I do have my own bias that I know that.
Of course, we all do.
There's
no
not
neutrality.
Just bias of the stories, but also bias of my opinion of media in and of itself.
Of course, and what you're trying to do quality-wise for the product. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. So I have all of that baked into my system. So while I like to think I'm more objective than others, I'm not as objective as I know I should be to a certain degree. And it's mostly because I just get angry at how we report things, because I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't good. But to answer your question, do people know that it's a narrative? I think they might give lip service to saying that they know it's a narrative, but they don't acknowledge, but they don't walk through the end of the implication.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well, there's a narrative going on. All right, but that means you need to be asking yourself, what aren't they telling me?
Right.
And this is something that's so annoying, because there's like, okay, well, what aren't they telling me? What do they want? What blah, 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 blah.
And why are they telling me this as opposed to that?
Right. And that's the other thing, because like people will say, oh, like they might not even necessarily understand the whole narrative, the narrative framework, like following that conclusion. They also don't follow through the fact that news is entertainment. It's not meant to inform you.
Right. Of course.
It's and the reason it's entertainment is because it's based off of business.
Mm-hmm.
The entire thing is based off of business. And so you're running into the situation where the business looks at what sells, and what sells is the entertaining stuff. So they feed that to people. Those people then take it and they like get used to that, and they like it. It's like sugar. You know, if you're eating sugar a lot, you get used to sugar. And so you keep needing
and
that
you crave
amount.
it. Yeah, you crave
Whereas
it.
if you go like cold turkey on sugar for between, I think it's 2 and 4 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks to 2 months. I can't remember the time frame.
Sure. Yeah.
When you come back and have sugar again, even a small amount of sugar is super sweet to you, because you've basically recalibrated your brain in a way. So when you have this scenario where it's like, oh, well, entertainment is what gives us money, so we're going to give more of that. Those people are like, oh, well, we're going to keep taking that in. And it just feeds itself into this point where, like, I can walk through an entire newscast with you and show, okay, this is how the interest curve is being followed here. The easiest example is we always end with a feel-good story. We always end, and it's called a kicker. And sometimes it's called a kicker because, you know, laugh, oh, that joke's a kicker or whatever, you know, because it can be funny, it can be cute, it can be endearing, whatever. But we always end on a happy note, plus the fast cast news at the end, which is rehashing everything that you've already heard. So you can tune it out. But if somebody's tuning in at the end, they get their little dose of the news and whatever. But even within that framework, we always end with weather. Why? Because one, weather is what everyone wants anyway. That's the information people really tune in for. And two, it's not a shooting, a stabbing, a whatever. They always do the shooting, stabbings, horrible things at the beginning of the little chunk and then end with that. So you're always ending on a positive note.
Right.
And that makes you want to come back.
Right.
If it bleeds, it leads is a very common phrase, because, and the idea is really dramatic, really gripping stuff. It's the in medias res opening, or the hot opener for most movies, games, things like that, where you start off with a really dramatic fight scene or whatever. You know, start off with that, and that gets people's interest, and then they keep watching after that, because the next thing is weather, and then the next thing is just kind of a low block, a block that doesn't have a lot of stuff in it. That's like, it's got some things, but it's mostly kind of filler there.
Right.
But we'll provide you with, like, say stuff about gas prices or whatever, you know, things like sort of just generic stuff to fill, until what we call the E block, which is the 5:30, which every half, or not 5:30, but the 30-minute mark, right? So at the half hour, then we restart and we go back up to the really high intense stuff and coast down. That way, if some people get up at 5:30, they can tune in and they can jump right into the action, as it were.
Right. And this is the meta narrative thinking that a lot of people like we talk about this kind of stuff all the time, because we're interested in it. We're interested in using it to get across points, to for much lack of a better term, and with no real malice or anything, manipulate what we're trying to get out of the situation, right? And so whatever that might be, and some people use it for good, some people use it for evil, whatever, you know. I'm not even talking about that part of it, but this is the way to communicate. This is a function of communication, pacing, you know, etc., putting this here and that there. I did this with DJing back when I DJ'd as you know, growing up in my father's DJ business. You know, you don't start out a wedding with, you know, like immediately when the first guest comes in, you hit the electric slide, right? Like they're coming in for dinner. Usually they're going to want some Frank Sinatra, some jazz, they want to feel classy at the beginning before any alcohol gets rolling. And then, you know, then you can get to your electric slide, and then it gets crazier as the night goes on. This is just normal flow of stuff to try and get the reactions that are needed to accomplish whatever the goal is, right? And so with all that kind of framework being said, you kind of seem to have, and we've talked about this a little bit in the Brood and some other places, some ideas of how that either is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like slightly changing, or we're dumbing it down, or, you know, you have made a video, I really liked it, and I want to recommend it to people. Remind me what that's called and where they can look it up.
Quiet is, I mean, if it's the video, I think it is. It's called Quiet. It's just on my on YouTube channel. I believe it's the Brendan Sunshine YouTube channel. So
yeah, just look up Brendan Sunshine Quiet. It has a picture from Spirited Away, Studio Ghibli stuff. So you can check that out. It's a good video, good sort of explanatory essay sort of video, and you did a good job. You did a good job with it.
Thank you.
So anyway, but so talk to me about that, and how story in your mind either is changing or what, or
okay, so short version of Quiet, just really fast. My general impression is that, like, I open it by saying we all know that something is wrong. Now, you and I would acknowledge that something is wrong. We are sinful people, right? We believe that Adam sinned, and thus mankind fell, and thus the solution is Christ and seeking after him and things like that. But ignoring that, even if you're not a Christian, you can look at the world and go, this is screwed up. This is not where we need to be, right? And I didn't want to have this particular thing be give an answer, right? I didn't want it to be y'all need Jesus, right? Now, I do think everybody needs Jesus, but
you're leading them to the water to see if they're thirsty, right? Yeah.
Right. And what I did was I said, well, let's take a moment, because what is one thing that I think is problematic? We're going too fast. I think everything has sped up way too much.
Right.
Is there a place for like TikTok style video or Vines?
Of course. Yeah.
I'm okay with things like that, like at least in theory.
Right.
The problem is we as a society, in my opinion, don't like waiting. One, we don't like being bored, and we don't like just having to, we don't like things taking a long time. We've got microwave dinners, we've got fast food, we've got TikToks and Facebook feeds and things like that. Scroll, find the next thing, find the next thing, find the next thing. Let's go. And that drives me absolutely crazy. And when the ADD guy is saying you're going too fast,
right,
we have a problem.
Yeah.
So I was looking at this, and was to answer, going back to what you were thinking about storytelling.
Sure.
Like, I think we really have lost the ability to sit with something and go through it. Now, a lot of people will sit and read, but how often is you're reading, like I'm binge reading an entire book in a day?
Right.
The Dresden Files, I love the Dresden Files. They're a great set of books, but they're very much like a blockbuster action movie where after like the first 2 or 3 chapters, every chapter ends with a cliffhanger. And so it's just kind of like Die Hard, next thing, go. Indiana Jones was the first movie that really got pacing, like, all right, we gotta go, right? Before that, you had things like Spartacus with Stanley Kubrick. You had 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it takes them 20 minutes of wide shots before you even get to space. And like, I make fun of 2001: A Space Odyssey because of how long it takes in the intro and how slow it is. But that just illustrates my point, right? That was the thing before.
Right.
We had a long-standing oral tradition. The Odyssey was an oral book before it was written down. Right. And the Judaism, the stories, the Torah, the things like that. Yeah, they wrote them down. They had the scrolls. There was writing, but how much of it was also an oral tradition before that, right?
Right.
And all of this baked in history and all of these things, and people would sit and listen to each other.
Right.
Part of that is we didn't have computer games or bowling alleys or whatever.
Well, let me throw out this idea and see if you would agree with it or tweak it or whatever. One of the big things that I have seen, and I think you would agree, the dispensational idea, the apocalyptic idea secularly, as well as the dispensational premillennialism that is rampant in the Christian world, has been for a while. The idea that Christ, this exact thing is the Antichrist, and we're in the absolute like last weeks leading up to Armageddon, et cetera. Yeah. So with all that like in everyone's brain and mind, and not thinking generationally, not thinking for the future, not planning, and putting down things that will take a long time to grow, because we don't believe that there is a future, right? I'm not saying I don't, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Do you think that might be one of the reasons that people don't want to slow any pacing?
I never connected that. I never connected that. I think that could be, but I am more inclined to think it has to do just with very clever, like I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think it has to do with clever manipulation of the market and
for sure
storytelling.
Yeah.
When you feed someone something, you condition them to want that thing. It
could be both.
It could be, yeah, it definitely could be both. Did you watch Doug Wilson and I can't remember his name, but I think he's a Baptist guy. They had a conversation recently where they were talking about the pre-mill and post-mill and things like that, and they brought up this sort of end times and how people who are like, oh well, everything's going to get wrapped up, they don't think about their grandchildren. Right. That was something that I saw. So it's very interesting you bring that up. But yeah, there's definitely a sort of some of it is The problem is there's probably so many contributing factors. Marketing, hey, make yourself happy. That's a really nice temptation. We want to be God. Two, well, if everything's going to end anyway, we might as well just enjoy ourselves while we can.
And do and squeeze as much of it as we can into the time that we have.
Yeah, exactly. How much of this is the American dream, which seems like a weird leap, but if it's like, well, if I am the decider of my own fate, then I need to be doing as much as I can with the amount of time that I have, because no one believes they're immortal.
Right.
Those that do usually are disappointed, and those who think they can become immortal, they usually think so via like I will become immortal by virtue of what I leave behind,
right?
Not by virtue of I'm actually physically immortal,
right?
So actually it's a really interesting take going to the sort of end times thing. Did you have? May I ask how you got there?
Sure. I'll show my work a little and show some of the other connections that I see. If you think about it from the perspective of someone at a party, we'll go back to the DJ thing, right?
Okay.
If you're a person, and a lot of this comes down to, I have a lot of song lyrics in my head, and one of the general idea, and I think it's an incredible piece of art and music itself. I'm not much of a fan of the video, but Sia's song Chandelier, are you familiar?
No, I'm not really.
Okay, well, Sia is an interesting person. She is a good bit older than your typical diva person. She was a studio musician for a long time. She doesn't do a lot of touring stuff, but she recently broke through in the past, like I say recent, probably like 6 or 7 years. And I'm pulling up the lyrics. She is totally an atheist, whatever, but there's this one song that is just, every now and then you get something kind of nihilistic in poetry or song lyrics or whatever else that actually really hits in a way that's like, wow, that is sad, right? And there's this beautiful, insane sadness to it. And this is one of those songs. I'm just going to read, I'll skip past, repeating parts, but basically, party girls don't get hurt, can't feel anything. When will I learn? I push it down. I push it down. Well, I'm the one for a good time call. Phone's blowing up, ringing my doorbell. I feel the love, feel the love. And then the chorus, the pre-chorus is 1 2 3 1 2 3 drink, repeated over and over.
Oh, that's okay.
Throw them back till I lose count. I'm gonna swing from the chandelier. I'm gonna live like tomorrow doesn't exist, like it doesn't exist, right? So basically, and then it says in verse 2, sun is up, I'm a mess. I feel the shame, and I'm trying to run back to the club, right? And it just goes through this whole thing. And to me, when I hear people like you and others describe the incessant, I think that's the word for it, TikTok culture, you're very quick, just relentless sort of pacing in everything, right? And everything being sold is of the utmost pace. That takes me back to this idea, because a person who actually parties like that isn't interested in having a good time. They're interested in having as much good time in as small amount in a small amount of space as possible, right?
Yeah. So sorry, may I interject?
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Because that made me think of two things. So one of my favorite, I say my favorite YouTube channels. I guess he's my favorite YouTube channel. It's a guy who does a series called Every Frame of Painting. And he does video essays based on film form. So everybody talks about themes. He talks about the actual like nuts and bolts. What does this shot mean? What does this shot mean? Right. How does this cut mean? Etc. Things like that. And he breaks things down in a very intelligent way. But two things that well, there's that, but also there's another video essay. I can't remember the guy who does it, but that was the main sort of jumping off point for the main middle section of Quiet, has to do with Studio Ghibli and this concept of Ma. But we'll start off with this, with the first one, with Every Frame of Painting. He does one on Bayhem, Michael Bay, and the Transformers and all of that stuff, and what is going on, what's going on. And a very interesting point. One of Michael Bay's favorite films is West Side Story.
Okay. Yeah.
And when asked about it, he can't articulate why, but he just knows that one thing is a good shot and another shot is a good, and another like cut is a good cut.
Right.
And the guy postulated in Every Frame of Painting, that particular episode on Bayhem, that Michael Bay wants to create a film that is full of good shots and good cuts and no bad ones.
Yeah.
And so what this means is he doesn't distinguish between scenes that require big parallax dramatic moments and dramatic camera moves and scenes that don't.
Right.
And so he'll do the exact same film language for a dramatic move in on a heroic shot with the guy defeating the big bad guy as a guy talking literal nonsense.
Right.
And so it's this constant bombardment and like, and so what you end up with this is like in a sort of in your head, if you take a second to think about it, there's this weird like cognitive dissonance where like the camera's saying one thing, but the subject is saying something else.
Right.
And so what happens is, well, you have to just keep going. And basically he's saying that Michael Bay is becoming a slave to his own style of editing and filming.
Right.
And that you cannot slow down once you start that.
Right.
And
right.
But on the flip side, if we look at Hayao Miyazaki with his films, he usually tries to put in what he calls ma. Now Miyazaki describes it as the space between a clap, which is a very Zen thing.
Right, right.
But taking a step back and looking practically what he means by that, basically you need to have calm moments to allow the weight of major like dramatic moments to actually set in.
Right.
In a way. So you have this situation where like the example I use is the moment of Ma where, well, there's one that he talks about, same movie, but it's where the girl's eating a rice dumpling. For me, it's the train ride. For those of you who have seen the movie, or for those of you who haven't seen the movie, the girl is chased by this monster. She chases it, she gets chased, she leads it out of the place so that it doesn't cause more harm. And as she's drawing it away, it's losing power and losing strength. And eventually they go and they board, and she and the former monster board this train and they just sit in silence for 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes of just them sitting, watching the stuff go by, people getting off the train and the train going and night falling and them moving and traveling.
And it's not boring.
And it's
that's
not boring.
The other thing. He makes it so it's not boring. There's enough going on that you feel like you're on the train with them waiting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beauty and artistry that you can just sit and enjoy, but it allows for you to like decompress.
Right.
And this is something that the Every Frame of Painting guy talks about is the but therefore episode where he's talking about like this happens, but then this happens, therefore the characters have to do this, but then this happens, rather than talking about and then. But he talks about like meanwhile back at the ranch, where if things are getting too crazy or or are starting to peter off too low, you change people and you can start building up again. And so the interest curve actually looks like that rather than just
right. Exactly. Yep. I'm totally there with you. And it's one of these things where the reason that I think people are not okay. So there's a difference between saying that there aren't enough quiet moments not just in film, but I'm talking in storytelling in general.
And in life.
Yeah, and communication and everything else. Yeah. There's a difference between saying there are not enough slow moments and saying that we don't know how to pace things.
Mhm.
And I think that I fall more into the we don't know how to pace things, because there are certain things in life and in the times that we live in where going as hard as you can is actually a virtue for a long extended periods, even to the point of burnout. And people talk about burnout like it's this thing you have to avoid at all costs, and I'm like, no, if you actually burn out with grace and actually know how to get your sleep as quickly as possible after the fact and get right back on the horse, like that's, you know,
Yeah.
that's just as valuable in certain times, right?
Right.
So that's the other thing. We've got an even bigger set of things to look at when it comes to our lives, our time, etc., the way we're stewards of it for God. If we're in a war, which is better, worrying about your work-life balance
or fighting the war?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I phrase it as there aren't enough quiet, slow moments, only because only because, like, I agree with you. There are times when you need to go all out.
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah, I know you're not.
My problem is that if we are in fact going fast, full pell-mell all the time, even when we shouldn't be,
yeah,
like with what Michael Bay does with his dramatic camera movement in on somebody when they're talking nonsense,
because we're on crack.
We need to be aware, like saying we need to better understand and better pace ourselves is going to sound like we need to slow down. So I might as well just say outright, we need to slow down.
Right.
If we're going at full speed, there's only one way we can go.
Right.
You know? But I totally agree with you. There are moments where you really need to, just go all in, as you say.
So with this, reading kind of the times and where we're at, you know, this is poets at war, like we're talking about, you know, the storytellers not only telling their stories but living their lives, the whole entire thing. This is one of those things that, like, Darren Doan and Doug TenNapel kind of have, you know, their take. And then I hear the other take, which is more kind of where you're at and whatever, you know, with a lot of stuff, and a couple other people that I know of that I really respect. And one of the things that I'm not fully connecting on either side, that I'm kind of like, okay, well, what's the deal? And Doan has actually kind of snapped on this a little bit, and he ended the Doan cast. I don't know if you heard that, but he had a whole episode talking about the reason he created the Doan cast is no longer relevant. And so, and the reason it's not relevant is because of the Sansdemic. There aren't enough people. So you can't just smash mouth your way through using the current technology and just willingness to work, Protestant work ethic, basically, because everyone is holding on to their jobs as ridiculously strongly as they can, because there just aren't enough people left to do all the jobs. You know what I'm saying? And the fact is, we've killed ourselves off. That's just a fact. Through abortion, through all this other kind of stuff, and
through all the bad things.
Yeah, no kidding. And so how does obviously there's still a culture war we're fighting, but the enemy's dying off. They're under siege. You know, I don't think a lot of people see that, but they're really truly under siege. The vast majority are older. We have one more generation, ours and slightly younger, to deal with before Gen Alpha comes, and most of Gen Alpha is going to be our children. And so my question is, how does an artist deal in that situation when it comes to pacing his own life and his stories?
So
I know, right? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
That is a really good question. So I know how I would answer it. However, that said, I'm going to be verbally processing, so I may pivot.
That's okay. I mean, it's a podcast. It's all like, to me, it's all verbal processing.
Okay. So my general idea is that I don't think humanity necessarily improves as it goes forward. Right?
Okay, so you're not post-mill in that way, or where are you at eschatologist? So I kind of
I'm generally Amil.
Okay,
gotcha. As Amil / pan mill, it'll all pan out. However,
okay, all right.
You know, I try not to think about that too much because it complicates things way more than my puny brain can handle.
Fair enough.
But for me, like when I say we're not improving, I'm pushing back against the secular idea that science, or Western secular idea that, oh, we've learned more, we're more enlightened.
Of course,
we've learned all these things. We know better than we did before.
Yeah, no.
I don't agree with that at all. So I push back against that idea.
Right.
So when I say we're not better off, that's what I mean.
Of course.
But I think that, or we don't know more than we did. The other thing is, I'm a firm believer in what I call the telephone problem. Have you ever played the game Telephone?
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. Exactly. Yeah.
So why on earth do we think we know better than the people who received God's word right off the bat?
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, that doesn't make any logical sense. They got it from the source. Why are we reinterpreting what is obviously written there?
Right.
But so so there's that element of just the content. Well, I was wondering, is there a way that we can bring like some of these oral traditions back? There was a video of a woman learning how to sing in a traditional Irish way, which is they memorize this ballad.
I've seen this, yeah. I've seen this, yeah.
You've seen that. You know what I'm talking
about. Pretty sure.
Yeah. So, but that's hanging on. Like it's not hanging on very hard, but there's a small community that really genuinely appreciates that. Can we maybe bring some of the old oral traditions back into modern stuff, right? But we need to be thinking about, what do we think is healthy? What do we think is godly? What do we think is proper? And when the new generation's coming in, artists, storytellers, things like that, we need to be modeling that for the next generations, for our kids and things like that. I think it's ND Wilson at a talk, he was saying, you know, everybody's asking me, how do I get my kids to read more? And I always ask them, well, are you reading? Yeah, we read to them. No, I mean, are you reading in your spare time?
Right.
To yourself.
Right.
So basically, and that really, like, that hit me hard, not because like of I was convicted, because I know I don't read enough. I've already had that problem. But I already recognized that was an issue. But it was like, oh, no, duh. Of course we're models for our children. How often do I look up to my dad?
Yep.
You know? So like, okay, we need to, the short answer to your question is, we need to develop effective habits and really think about what pacing do we want to promote.
Right.
And then do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's one of those things that people, you know, in various points and times in my life, they'll say, and this is one of those things, that's not going to be the same answer for everybody. That's what I'm getting at right here with this, what I'm saying here. So I've had my whole life, people say, you're going too fast. I've had that side of things pushed at me in ways that really didn't help. In fact, it hindered me in a lot of ways. I'm like, oh, I should probably listen to these people because they're really smart and they love me. And turned out that was one thing that they were wrong about. You know, not everybody said that, but, you know, there were some really well-meaning people who were major tutors in my life and all kinds of other stuff. And they just, you know, saw this kid who was just floundering. But what I was really actually doing was, I tend to have to go the long way around to learn stuff. And if I'm going to learn a lot of stuff, I'm going to have to do it as fast as possible in all the wrong ways in order to get to the right one.
Yeah.
And that's just something that has consistently been a part of my life. So when I hear slow down, I immediately kind of kick back, but I've come around on that a little bit in some ways, the biggest one of which is pacing. I find, when you actually talk in terms of pacing, in terms of knowing, like Ecclesiastes, I'm surprised we hadn't brought it up till now, to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. There's so many people who interpret that completely differently. But very few of them I ever hear say that Joshua is meant to have a crazier life than, I don't know, it's just somebody else. You know what I mean? No one really talks about that. And yet we have really good at ease lives in the scripture, and then we have really crazy, ridiculous, something happens to them every second lives in the scripture, right? And they just can't get out from under the crushing weight of everything, right? But I mean, I don't know, man. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I'm totally on board with you then. Like, we're definitely on the same page in regards to that. But
yeah, at that point, then the question is there a, like everyone, I agree that everybody is different, but then we run into the question of, just because everyone's different, does that mean that not everyone, or how do I phrase this? Yes, you might be going faster more times than me. Right. Your default might be faster than me. Right. But you should still learn to slow down.
Just when it's time to slow down. Yeah. And speed up when it's time to speed up. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I should need to learn to, like, go pell now full blown, which I'm talking as if I like to go slow. I actually generally don't most of the time.
I know you.
But I also have this tendency to, I also don't like messing up and making mistakes. I know mistakes, that's just a part of life and learning, but I don't like it.
You're definitely way more perfectionist than me.
Yeah. No, it's bad. It's really bad. I know I need to get better at that. But that's the thing. Like, so in that case, I've been sort of, in a way, forcing myself to get more comfortable with slowing down and not going full speed, because there have been way too many times when going full speed has punished me.
Right.
I dropped my camera at work recently, and it had to be sent in for repairs, and now I'm using one, and that's the second time in 6 months. And so I'm like, okay, now every time I move the camera, I'm taking it off the tripod.
Yeah. I'm
not moving the tripod in the camera, because I can't be trusted.
Right.
So and I'm not about to go into the therapy of Brendan is afraid of people and go down that rabbit trail. But the point is, like, yes, everybody has a different sort of, let's just say, comfortable speed to drive at. Like,
and it's not even necessarily that it's the comfortable one. Is it the right one or not? That's what it really comes down to. And I think that God gives different situations and circumstances and brain powers to everybody. I consider my dyslexia a power, not a hindrance. Because I think in really connected ways that a lot of people don't. Like you talked about earlier when I mentioned the Sia song and how I connected all those dots of, Armageddonism, let's be real, to the TikTok culture. But it's like, that's me, it's not you. And as poets, as people who make beautiful things, as artists, like, I think if we're gonna expect anyone to be kind with us and let us scramble in the dark for all the beauty and things that we need to pull down for the world, we need to be kind to each other first and foremost. And in the conservative spaces, I have not seen that level of kindness that is really needed very often. There's still a lot of jumping to conclusions. There's still a lot of, oh, you're a heretic because XYZ.
And I that's one of the things, like, I'm not a huge like, I think the lore guys are onto something and they're doing great work, but I think that they're way too suspicious of Dallas Jenkins and the Chosen. I think I understand what their concerns are, but, and I understand what they're trying to do, and to a certain degree, but it's also they're so quick to almost bash something that even begins to from my perspective, they seem quick to bash something and they even hints it might start going in the direction of heresy or whatever. And I'm like, okay, take a chill pill for a second.
Right.
So I do see what you mean. But
let me just say too, I don't like The Chosen simply because I don't like desert Bible movies. I never have. But that's just my taste,
I mean, yeah, that's yeah, right, but that's different.
Right.
That is a different thing. That is I have this aesthetic. This is what I enjoy. This is not fitting into what I enjoy. And so,
versus attacking individuals. They don't really attack individuals so much as I feel like the push of the industry as a whole is the biggest thing that they attack. And I'm less of an issue with that than the individuals. But yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. And I have a less of an issue with that as well. But like, because I'm not a fan of Disney grooming. I'm not a fan of Netflix grooming. I'm not a fan of all that either. So them calling a sin, and a spade, yes, do it, please. But that's I don't know. There's the question of it's like if I were to give you constructive criticism or you to give me constructive criticism, like I've been very careful. I joined a filmmaking class online group thing, and whenever I give feedback, I always start with, okay, here's what I think you did well. I always start with that, not because I want to butter them up, but because I know that if I were to receive constructive criticism, I would want someone to tell me both what I did good and need to keep doing, as well as what do I need to improve on. Because if I know me, and if I just had my thing torn apart, it wouldn't feel great, especially because I don't know necessarily if what I did worked.
And the grace on the other side is when you're getting something critiqued from somebody, or you're even just asking them a directional question. My friend Ian Wilson, he's a huge help to me. I don't know if you heard, but we're actually working on a lore series. I mean, it's not picked up by them yet, but it's in production. And it's animated and all kinds of other stuff, and we're working on it. It's more of a motion comic, but it's animated. It's a little bit more than a motion comic. It's really well done motion comic. The idea is that I was trying to go in some other ways and look at some other things, and I'm always off on the fringes trying to find exactly what I'm looking for. I'm failing at all the ways to find out the best one. I have FOMO like crazy, you know what I mean? So Ian basically pulled me aside and said, look, man, what you're doing, it doesn't look that great. I think you really need to get back to what we were doing, you and I, with the art, because I'm coloring his stuff, but he's the main line guy. And but he came at it from a kind way, and my whole thing was like, no dude, you say I'm going off deep end in some ways. I need to know every single inch of this. Come on, give it to me right now. That's the other end of the grace, right? Is saying, please give me everything you have, because I know you're not attacking me, you're attacking my work, and I can differentiate myself from my work.
But that's not always the case.
What do you mean?
I can differentiate myself from my work. You're right that I am not quiet. I'm not that video. I am not this other video. I'm not what I edit. But I am investing my time, and not just my time, but I'm investing myself into that.
Oh, sure.
And while, yes, I agree with you, I need to have the grace to say, I am not my work. You critiquing my work. I need to be willing to listen and to hear and to take more, give me more. Come on. Keep telling me what I can improve, things like that. Yes, I agree. We need to have grace with that. But I would like to just temper for those people who might be listening to this who don't have this.
Right.
Some of us feel that our work is almost an extension of ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, and there isn't an entire, Doug Wilson talks about this, like if the peasants in the valley hate the king, well, they can't go and attack the king in the castle, so what do? They burn him in effigy.
Right.
They burn his image. If my creation is an extension of myself and somebody goes after it and completely rips it apart,
yeah,
it's almost like burning me in effigy, and it's in a way it feels like an attack on me, even though I know logically it's not.
Right. Well,
So,
I was talking more in a perspective where you're asking for somebody's help, versus the other. But yeah, no, I totally get that side. The other thing that I failed to mention was specifically that the idea that you asking for someone's feedback and saying, come on, give me more, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with what they have to say.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. That's the other part I failed to mention, because I had to really think about what Ian said before I agreed with him. But when I did, I was like, oh, Ian saved me a whole lot of extra time flailing around in the darkness trying to figure this thing out. Right. And I'm very thankful to him as a result. So, well, we're heading to the end of the hour. Do you want to plug in any of your stuff? Well, obviously, I'm going to link to that video so that people can go see it, the quiet video. Is there any other stuff you want to say to the people listening, to the Brood, to the other folks? We're starting to grow a little bit, so
yeah, you've got a nice little group there. Hi Brood, sorry I don't talk much. No, things are going well. One of the things I didn't mention is that just in my life, so part of this past week Kirith and I have been applying to potentially work with GEM, Greater Europe Mission. And one of the things that GEM has is they have this production company called Gemstone Media. And I actually met with the founder of Gemstone Media yesterday, and we had a nice chat, and things are looking really good. And so I might be moving to some capacity to working with them. It's still very early in the process, and it would take a really long time. But that's something I'm excited for. It's something I'm really looking forward to. I'm hoping to get more stuff out, but I don't know what yet. Like I'm writing a comic. I'm trying to write a long form thing. I need to come up with ideas. I need to make stuff. But I appreciate you and what you do, and you encouraging me and helping me work through things like we did a while ago. I appreciate all that.
And if you need more of that, if you just need a writer's room Zoom call sometime, that's not on Poets at War and whatever, go let me know. We'll schedule it.
Sure. Thanks. I'd love to.
And that goes for anybody that I know or that wants to text me and say, hey, I'm this person, blah, blah, blah. I always put my text in most of my videos. My that's my direct number. So like anyone who wants to, that honestly, that's my dream. Dan Povenmire, who created or is it Dave? I don't know, who did Phineas and Ferb and has done a lot of other Disney stuff. He has a TikTok, and he was talking about how like someone asked like, what's your regular day look like? And he's like, I go drop my daughter off at her private school, and then I come back, and then I work on like this Disney show and that Disney show and this one that I'm starting for them. And quite frankly, and then I have like a couple of writers' room meetings and whatever else. And it's just, he's like, honestly, I love my life. And I was like, yep. I mean, if I could just talk story all day with people and workshop stuff like I do with you, I'd be happy. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
by all means, people. But did you have anything else?
I mean, keep writing, keep doing things, pace yourselves, please.
Yes, pace yourselves. I like that.
Please pace yourselves.
That might be a title of the episode or something close to that. All righty, y'all. Well, remember, Be your family's bard. Don't turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. We'll see you next time in the trenches. Pace yourself on Poets at War.
God of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall pray.